Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Endeavour, watching the stars drift past the main viewing screen. The ship had been traveling through empty space for 3 weeks now, far beyond the edges of known human territory. This was what Jake loved most about exploration missions, the quiet moments before something big happened. "Captain, I'm picking up some strange readings," called Dr. Lisa Carter from her science station. The ship's xenobiologist was bent over her instruments, her brown hair falling across her face as she studied the data. "There's something massive about 2 light years ahead. The energy signatures don't match anything in our database." Commander Ryan Brooks moved from his tactical station to look over Lisa's shoulder. The tall man frowned as he studied the readings. "Those power levels are off the charts. Whatever it is, it's bigger than anything we've ever seen." Jake felt his pulse quicken. After 15 years of deep space exploration, he knew when they were about to encounter something important. "All stop. Take us to yellow alert." The bridge lights dimmed slightly as the crew prepared for potential danger. "Lisa, what can you tell me about these readings?" Lisa's fingers danced across her console as she analyzed the data. "The energy output suggests a ship, Captain. But it would have to be enormous. At least 5 times the size of our largest dreadnought. The technology appears to be completely alien." "Any signs of weapons?" Ryan asked, his hand already moving toward the ship's defense controls. "Unknown. The energy patterns are unlike anything we've studied before." Lisa looked up from her station, excitement and worry mixing in her eyes. "Captain, I think we're looking at our first contact with a truly advanced alien species." Jake nodded slowly. Every human in space dreamed of this moment. For 200 years, humanity had spread across the stars, finding empty worlds and ancient ruins, but never living aliens. "Set course for the energy source. Half impulse. And get me a full crew briefing in 1 hour." The USS Endeavour changed direction and began moving toward the mysterious readings. In the ship's main briefing room, Jake gathered his senior officers. Besides Lisa and Ryan, there was Chief Engineer Marcus Webb, a quiet man who could fix anything, and Marine Sergeant Amy Foster, whose small frame hid incredible toughness. "What we're approaching could change everything," Jake told them. "If these are hostile aliens, we need to be ready. But if they're peaceful, we might be making history." Amy Foster spoke up from across the table. "Captain, my Marines are ready for anything. But if this ship is as big as Dr. Carter says, we might be outgunned." "That's why we'll be careful," Jake replied. "Our job is to observe and report back to Earth. We're not here to start a war." 2 hours later, the alien ship appeared on their main screen. The crew stared in silence at the massive vessel before them. It was dark gray and shaped like a predator's tooth, with sharp angles and weapon ports covering its hull. The ship was clearly built for war. "My God," whispered Lisa. "It's beautiful and terrifying at the same time." "I'm reading multiple weapon systems," Ryan reported, his voice tense. "They could destroy us without breaking a sweat." Before Jake could respond, the communication system crackled to life. The voice that came through was deep and harsh, speaking in a language none of them recognized. But somehow, the ship's translation system began working on the signal. "Unknown vessel, you have entered the territory of the Vorthak Empire. Identify yourselves or be destroyed." Jake straightened in his captain's chair. "Open a channel." When Ryan nodded, Jake spoke clearly. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth ship Endeavour. We come in peace and wish to establish diplomatic contact." The response came quickly, and this time the translation was clearer. "Weak beings from a primitive world. You will surrender your vessel immediately. Resistance will result in death." Ryan's hands moved over his weapons controls. "Captain, they're powering up some kind of boarding system. I think they plan to take our ship." Jake's mind raced. Everything about first contact protocol said to avoid violence, but these aliens seemed determined to attack. "All hands prepare for boarding action. Marines to defensive positions." Amy Foster was already moving toward the door. "My people will be ready, Captain." Moments later, the Endeavour shook as something attached to the hull. The lights flickered, and then the ship's computer announced that the hull had been breached in 3 places. Amy's voice came over the ship's communication system. "Captain, they're big. Really big. And they're strong. But we're holding the main corridor." Through the internal cameras, Jake watched the battle unfold. The aliens were massive creatures standing 12 feet tall with thick armor covering their bodies. They moved with deadly grace, carrying weapons that could punch through steel. But Amy's Marines were fighting smart, using the ship's narrow corridors to their advantage. "They're like living tanks," Marcus muttered, watching from the bridge. "How are our people stopping them?" The answer came from Amy herself as she dove behind cover and fired at an advancing alien. "They're strong, but they fight like they've never met real resistance before. They expect us to run." One of the aliens, larger than the others and covered in decorative scars, pushed forward toward the bridge. This had to be their leader. The creature's voice boomed through the ship's corridors as it spoke in its own language. Lisa worked frantically at her console. "I'm getting a partial translation. I think he's saying something about weak prey and easy conquest." The alien leader, War Commander Thexhi, had expected this to be simple. Every species the Vorthak had ever encountered had surrendered quickly when faced with their warriors. These small humans should have been the easiest conquest yet. But as Thexhi watched his warriors struggle against the human defenders, confusion filled his mind. The humans were tiny compared to Vorthak, but they fought with a cleverness and determination he had never seen. They used their ship's layout against his warriors, striking from unexpected angles and disappearing before his people could respond. In the main corridor, Amy Foster crouched behind an overturned table, reloading her weapon. 3 of her Marines were wounded, but they had stopped the alien advance. The big aliens were strong, but they seemed surprised by human tactics. "They fight like they've never lost a battle," she called to her second-in-command, Corporal Danny Martinez. "But they don't know how to handle guerrilla warfare." Danny nodded, firing another burst at the aliens. "They're too used to winning with brute force." On the bridge, Jake watched the battle with growing amazement. His small crew was actually holding off these massive alien warriors, but he knew they couldn't last forever. "Lisa, can you get a message to Earth?" "Working on it, Captain. But their ship is jamming most of our communications." Suddenly, the alien attack stopped. Through the ship's cameras, Jake could see the massive warriors retreating toward their boarding craft. War Commander Thexhi appeared on the main screen, his scarred face twisted with what might have been respect or anger. The translation came through clearly this time. "You fight better than expected, humans. This is not finished. The Empire will study you before we return." The alien boarding craft detached from the Endeavor, and the massive warship began moving away, but Jake could see weapons still tracking his vessel. "They could destroy us right now," Ryan said quietly. "Why aren't they?" Amy Foster's voice came from the corridor, where she was checking on her wounded Marines. "Because we surprised them, Captain. I don't think anyone has ever fought them to a standstill before." Jake stared at the retreating alien ship, knowing that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and their new neighbors were the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever seen. But somehow, his small crew had stood their ground against impossible odds. As the alien ship disappeared into the darkness of space, Jake wondered what would happen when they returned with reinforcements. "Set course for Earth," he ordered. "Maximum speed. Command needs to know what's coming." The news of human resistance spread through Vorthak space faster than their fastest ships. In the grand war chambers of the Empire, military commanders gathered around holographic displays showing the encounter with the USS Endeavor. None of them could believe what they were seeing. High Commander Vexital, leader of the Vorthak military, watched the battle recordings for the 5th time. His massive clawed hands gripped the edge of the metal table as he studied how the tiny humans had fought his warriors to a standstill. "This cannot be accurate," growled War Master Zenkar from across the room. The scarred veteran had conquered 47 worlds for the Empire. "No prey species has ever resisted our boarding parties." "The recordings do not lie," replied Intelligence Chief Morhex, her voice cold and calculating. "These humans fought with tactics we have never encountered. They used their environment as a weapon." High Commander Vextal turned away from the hologram. For 3,000 years, the Vorthak Empire had been built on one simple truth. They were the strongest species in the galaxy. Their warriors were unstoppable. Every other race bowed before Vorthak might or was destroyed, but these humans had changed everything. "We need more information," Vextal declared. "Send Shadowhunter Krelvan to observe their worlds. I want to know everything about these creatures before we make our next move." Krelvan was the Empire's best scout. Unlike most Vorthak warriors, he was built for stealth rather than open combat. His dark armor could bend light around him, making him nearly invisible. His enhanced senses could detect danger from miles away. If anyone could study the humans without being caught, it was him. 3 weeks later, Krelvan's small scout ship entered human space near the colony world of New Texas. He had spent days studying human communication signals, learning their languages and customs. What he discovered made no sense. According to their own records, humans came from a world called Earth. But as Krelvan analyzed the data about this planet, his blood ran cold. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world. Such planets were considered impossible for complex life to evolve on. The gravity was crushing. The weather was violent and unpredictable. The native life forms were aggressive predators. Even the plant life was often poisonous or carnivorous. No intelligent species should have been able to survive on such a world, let alone thrive enough to reach the stars. Krelvan landed his cloaked ship on New Texas and began his observations. The human colony was built around a mining operation, extracting rare metals from deep underground. What shocked him was how casually the humans worked in conditions that would kill most galactic species. He watched construction worker Pete Johnson operating heavy machinery in an atmosphere that contained toxic gases. The human wore only a simple breathing mask, not the full environmental suits that even Vorthak would require. Pete lifted metal beams that weighed several tons, his muscles straining but managing the load. Another day in paradise, Pete joked to his co-worker as they took a break. The two humans sat on a metal girder hundreds of feet above the ground, eating their lunch as if sitting on deadly heights was perfectly normal. Krelvan moved to the colony's research station, where marine biologist Dr. Karen Mills was studying the planet's ocean life. He watched in amazement as she dove into the crushing depths of the sea without mechanical assistance. The pressure at that depth should have killed her instantly, but she swam through the water like it was her natural environment. The deep-sea creatures here are fascinating, Karen told her research partner as she surfaced. The pressure creates some unique adaptations, just like back on Earth. Back on Earth. Krelvan realized that to humans this dangerous world was normal. They had evolved on something far worse. His observations continued at the colony's agricultural sector, where farmer Bill Turner was working in fields exposed to radiation levels that would be lethal to Vorthak within hours. Bill wore no protective gear except a wide-brimmed hat to keep the sun out of his eyes. "Crops are growing well this season," Bill called to his neighbor. "The soil here reminds me of the farmland back in Kansas." Krelvan used his ship's computers to analyze what he was seeing. The humans were not just surviving in these conditions. They were thriving. Their bodies had adapted to process toxins that would poison other species. Their bones were dense enough to handle crushing gravity. Their reflexes were fast enough to deal with constant environmental threats. But it was more than just physical adaptation. As Krelvan continued watching, he saw something that disturbed him even more. The humans worked together in ways the Vorthak never did. When a piece of mining equipment broke down, Pete Johnson and 5 other workers immediately began cooperating to fix it. They shared tools, combined their knowledge, and solved the problem together. When Dr. Karen Mills discovered a new species of predatory fish, she immediately called her colleagues to share the information. Among the Vorthak, such knowledge would be hoarded for personal advantage. "Hey Krell, you getting this?" Karen said into her communication device, speaking to a research partner on another world. The new species shows pack hunting behavior. They coordinate their attacks like wolves. Krelvan froze. For a moment he thought the human had spotted him, but then he realized she was talking to someone with a similar name. The coincidence made him nervous. On his 5th day of observation, Krelvan witnessed something that changed his understanding of humans completely. A severe storm struck the colony, with winds strong enough to level buildings and lightning that turned the sky white. Most species would have taken shelter and waited for the danger to pass. The humans fought back against the storm. Emergency. Teams led by Colony Administrator Rachel Stone worked through the hurricane conditions to rescue trapped miners. Krelvan watched her coordinate rescue operations while standing in winds that could knock down a Vorthak warrior. "We've got 17 people trapped in Tunnel 7, Rachel shouted over the storm noise. "Pete, take your team through the north entrance. Karen, can your underwater gear help us pump out the flooded sections?" "Already on it," both humans replied without hesitation. As the rescue continued, Krelvan saw humans risk their own lives repeatedly to save others. They dove into flooded tunnels, climbed through unstable wreckage, and worked in conditions that should have been impossible. But what amazed him most was how they never gave up. Even when the situation seemed hopeless, when the storm grew stronger and the rescue became more dangerous, the humans kept fighting. They adapted their plans, found new solutions, and refused to abandon anyone. That's all 17 accounted for, Pete reported as the last miner was pulled to safety. Nobody's left behind. Outstanding work, everyone, Rachel replied, her voice tired but proud. This is what we do. This is who we are. As the storm finally passed, Krelvan sat in his hidden ship, trying to process what he had witnessed. The humans were not just strong in body, they were strong in spirit. They faced impossible odds and found ways to win. They protected each other at their own expense. They turned their harsh world into a home through sheer determination. For the first time in his life, Krelvan felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Not fear of human strength, though that was terrifying enough. Fear of what they represented. The Vorthak Empire was built on the idea that might makes right. The strongest dominated the weak. It was natural law. But humans seemed to believe that the strongest should protect the weak. They used their power to save others rather than conquer them. Krelvan began preparing his report for High Command, knowing that what he had to say would shake the Empire to its core. Humans were not just another prey species to be conquered. They were something the Vorthak had never encountered before. They were equals. As his ship lifted off from New Texas, Krelvan took one last look at the human colony. The humans were already rebuilding what the storm had damaged, working together with the same determination that had saved 17 lives. They sang songs while they worked, their voices carrying across the harsh landscape. The Vorthak Empire would never be the same again. The Vorthak Empire's High Council chamber had never been so quiet. 50 of the most powerful military leaders in the galaxy sat in stunned silence as Shadow Hunter Krelvan finished his report. The holographic displays around the room showed images of humans working in impossible conditions, fighting deadly storms, and thriving on worlds that should have killed them. High Commander Vextal stared at the data with disbelief. You are certain of these readings? A Class 12 Deathworld? I verified the information 17 times, Krelvan replied, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was reporting. Their home planet Earth has gravity that would crush most species. The weather systems are violent beyond measure. The native life forms include creatures that hunt in coordinated packs. Even their plant life is often deadly. War Master Zenkar slammed his massive fist on the table. Impossible. No species could evolve intelligence under such conditions. Yet they did, Krelvan continued. And more than that, they adapted. What kills other species only makes them stronger. I watched a human work for hours in atmospheric conditions that would poison a Vorthak warrior in minutes. Intelligence Chief Morhex studied the biological data on her display. If this is accurate, then humans possess physical capabilities that rival our own. But their real strength appears to be their ability to work together. They fight as one mind, Krelvan agreed. When faced with danger, they do not compete with each other for survival. They combine their efforts to save everyone. It is unlike anything we have encountered. High Commander Vextal rose from his seat and walked to the chamber's great window, looking out at the Vorthak homeworld below. For 3,000 years, the Empire had conquered world after world based on a simple truth. They were the strongest, therefore they ruled. But humans challenged that fundamental belief. What do you recommend? Vextal asked without turning around. We must test them, replied War Master Zenkar. If they are truly as strong as this report suggests, we need to know their limits. I propose a series of calculated strikes against their border colonies. We will see how they respond to real pressure. And if they prove to be as dangerous as Krelvan suggests? Zenkar's scarred face twisted into what might have been a smile. Then we will have found worthy opponents. It has been too long since the Vorthak faced a real challenge. 3 months later, Admiral Grace Phillips stood in the command center of Starbase 7, watching the tactical displays with growing concern. The Vorthak had been conducting hit-and-run attacks on human colonies for weeks now. Each strike was carefully planned to test human defenses without causing total destruction. Another attack on the mining colony at Beta Centauri, reported her aide, Commander Jason Lee. They hit the main power station and withdrew before our patrol ships could respond. Grace studied the pattern of attacks on her holographic display. Each strike targeted different aspects of human operations. Communications, power systems, supply lines, defensive positions. The Vorthak were learning everything they could about human capabilities. They're testing us, she realized. Every attack is designed to see how we respond to different types of pressure. Orders, Admiral? Grace considered her options. The Terran Defense Force could meet force with force, but that might escalate into full-scale war. Earth's population was still small compared to the vast Vorthak Empire, but she also couldn't allow the attacks to continue unchallenged. Deploy the rapid response fleets to high-probability target zones, and get me a direct line to the research station at Kepler Prime. If the Vorthak want to test us, we need to learn about them too. At the Kepler Prime research facility, engineer Marcus Webb was already working on that exact problem. The destroyed Vorthak equipment recovered from their raids was unlike any technology humans had seen before. But as Marcus studied the alien devices, he began to understand their design philosophy. Everything they build is focused on raw power, he explained to his research team. Their weapons are designed to overwhelm enemies through brute force. Their ships prioritize strength over maneuverability. It's like they've never faced an opponent who could match them in direct combat. Dr. Claire Roberts, Earth's chief xenodiplomat, was studying the cultural implications. Their entire society appears to be built around the concept of strength-based hierarchy. The strongest lead, the weak follow. It's a system that works when you're always the strongest species in the room. But what happens when they meet equals? Asked her assistant, Dr. Paul Anderson. That's what we're about to find out. The answer came sooner than expected. During a Vorthak raid on the agricultural world of New Eden, something unprecedented happened. When Vorthak warriors boarded the human transport ship Meridian, they encountered engineer Marcus Webb and Vorthak technician Zelkar working together to prevent the ship's reactor from exploding. The reactor had been damaged during the attack, and radiation was building to critical levels. Both species would die if the containment system failed. Marcus was trying to reroute power while Zelkar used his superior strength to manually hold damaged components in place. The power coupling is fused, Marcus called out, sweat dripping down his face as he worked in the radioactive environment. I need to bypass the main line, but I can't reach it while maintaining the secondary systems. Zelkar, despite being trained as an enemy of humanity, found himself impressed by the humans' determination. No Vorthak would willingly work in such dangerous conditions to save others. I can reach the coupling. Tell me what to do. For the next hour, human and Vorthak worked together to save both their lives. Marcus's technical knowledge combined with Zelkar's physical strength proved to be exactly what was needed. When they finally stabilized the reactor, both were exhausted but alive. Why did you help me? Zelkar asked as they sat recovering from the radiation exposure. I am your enemy. Marcus looked at the massive alien warrior, seeing past the fearsome appearance to the intelligence beneath. Because letting you die wouldn't have solved anything. We're both just trying to survive. Word of the cooperation spread through both fleets. Vorthak warriors who had been taught that humans were weak prey began to question their orders. Human soldiers who had feared the alien invaders started to see them as individuals rather than monsters. Captain Nick Stevens of the rescue ship, Aurora, witnessed the change firsthand during a joint rescue operation. A merchant vessel carrying both human and Vorthak passengers had been caught in an asteroid storm and was breaking apart. As rescue teams from both species worked together to save the survivors, old enemies became temporary allies. Sector 7 is collapsing, Stevens called over the communication system. We need to get those people out now. Vorthak rescue team responding, came the reply from War Captain Mordek. Our cutting tools can breach the hull faster than yours. Acknowledged. Human teams will handle medical evacuation once you create the breach. As humans and Vorthak worked side by side, pulling survivors from the wreckage, something fundamental shifted in how both species viewed each other. They shared the same determination to save lives. They showed the same courage in the face of danger. They protected the weak and honored the brave. Dr. Claire Roberts was monitoring these developments from Earth when she received an unexpected communication. Ambassador Veltara of the Peaceful Etherian Federation was requesting an urgent meeting. The galaxy has been watching your conflict with the Vorthak, Veltara explained during their holographic conference. Her species was one of the oldest in the galaxy, and their wisdom was respected by all civilized worlds. What we are seeing suggests something unprecedented. Two Deathworld species learning to cooperate rather than compete. Is that significant? More than you can imagine. For millions of years, the strongest species have dominated the weak. But if humans and Vorthak can work together, it would create a new model for galactic civilization, strength used to protect rather than conquer. Before Claire could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the research station. Emergency broadcasts flooded the communication channels from across human space. The long-range sensors had detected something terrifying approaching. From the edge of the galaxy, the Void Swarm had arrived. Captain Nick Stevens received the alert while his ship was still conducting rescue operations alongside Vorthak vessels. The message was brief but chilling. Mechanical entities of unknown origin were consuming everything in their path. Planets, ships, entire solar systems were being stripped of all organic matter. Estimated time until the swarm reaches human space, Stevens asked his navigator. 6 months, Captain. Maybe less. Stevens looked at the Vorthak warriors who had been helping rescue the survivors. War Captain Mordek caught his eye and nodded grimly. The alien had received the same information through his own channels. It seems we have bigger problems than fighting each other, Stevens said. Indeed, Mordek replied. The swarm does not distinguish between human and Vorthak. To them, we are all equally food. Across the galaxy, the news of the approaching void swarm forced both species to confront a harsh reality. They could continue fighting each other and face extinction separately, or they could combine their strengths and face the threat together. The choice would determine the fate of both civilizations. The emergency meeting took place on neutral ground, aboard the Etherian diplomatic station orbiting the gas giant Titan 7. For the first time in galactic history, human and Vorthak leaders sat at the same table not as enemies, but as species facing extinction. General Kevin Martinez represented the human military, his weathered face showing the strain of preparing for an impossible war. Across from him sat Vorthak Supreme War Chief Gentar, whose massive frame made the specially reinforced chair creak with every movement. Between them, Ambassador Veltara of the Etherians served as mediator. The Void Swarm has consumed 14 systems in the past month, Veltara began, her melodic voice carrying the weight of terrible news. Our long-range sensors show millions of mechanical entities stripping worlds of all organic matter. They show no interest in communication or negotiation. General Martinez studied the holographic displays showing the swarm's advance. Each red dot represented a dead world. Our analysts estimate we have 4 months before they reach the core human colonies. How much time do the Vorthak territories have? Less, rumbled War Chief Gentar. The swarm approaches our border worlds first. We have perhaps 2 months before they begin consuming our outer colonies. Then we fight together or we die separately, Martinez said bluntly. Our species have differences, but the swarm doesn't care about politics. Gentar leaned forward, his yellow eyes studying the human general. 3 months ago, he would have considered humans to be weak prey. Now, after seeing them fight alongside his warriors during rescue operations, he recognized them as equals. The Vorthak Empire agrees to military alliance, he declared. But our fighting styles are different. Your people use tactics and cooperation. Mine rely on strength and direct assault. Can such methods work together? We're about to find out, Martinez replied. The first joint operation took place at the Kepler system, where human and Vorthak fleets combined to face a void swarm probe force. Lieutenant Casey Brown sat in the cockpit of her fighter, surrounded by both human and Vorthak pilots in the mixed squadron. Remember, the swarm ships are fast, but they can't think creatively, came the voice of squadron leader Vexhan, a Vorthak pilot whose ship flew alongside Casey's. We used their mechanical thinking against them. Casey checked her weapons systems as the enemy ships appeared on sensors. The Void Swarm vessels looked like metallic insects, all sharp angles and cutting tools designed for harvesting organic matter. They moved in perfect formation like a machine programmed for efficiency. Human fighters execute evasive pattern delta, called Casey into her communicator. Vorthak heavy fighters, prepare for hammer strike. The battle plan was simple but effective. Human fighters with their superior maneuverability would confuse and scatter the swarm formation. Then the heavily armed Vorthak ships would smash through the disrupted enemy lines. Casey dove her fighter between 2 swarm ships, their cutting beams missing her by inches. Behind her, Vexhan's massive fighter unleashed a barrage of plasma fire that destroyed 3 enemy vessels. The combination of human speed and Vorthak firepower proved devastating. Enemy formation is breaking up, reported Casey as she rolled away from another attack. Vorthak squadrons, you have clear shots. The space battle was over in minutes, but it proved something important. Humans and Vorthak fighting together were more effective than either species alone. The news of the victory spread through both fleets, boosting morale and proving that cooperation was possible. Back on the Joint Command Station, engineer Rachel Stone worked alongside Vorthak weaponsmith Torval to develop new technologies. The combination of human innovation and Vorthak engineering strength was producing weapons unlike anything either species had created alone. The human shield generators are more efficient than ours, Torval admitted as he studied Rachel's designs. But they lack the raw power output our ships need. Rachel nodded, her fingers dancing over the holographic blueprints. What if we combine them? Use your power cores with our control systems. We get efficiency and strength together. The resulting hybrid technology was revolutionary. Shield systems that could absorb enormous amounts of damage while using minimal power. Weapons that combined precise targeting with devastating firepower. Engines that were both fast and incredibly durable. But the real test came when the main swarm force arrived at the Kepler system. Commander Susan Hayes stood on the bridge of the battleship Defiant, watching the tactical display with growing concern. The swarm had sent over 10,000 ships, a mechanical army that blotted out the stars. Beside her, Vorthak War Captain Mordek studied the same data with his species' analytical mind. They outnumber us 5-1, Susan observed. Even with our combined fleets, this will be close. Numbers mean nothing if we fight smart, Mordek replied. The swarm thinks like a machine. We think like living beings. The battle for Kepler system began with the swarm ships advancing in perfect geometric formations. But instead of meeting them head-on, the combined human Vorthak fleet used a strategy neither species would have attempted alone. Human ships with their advanced sensors identified weak points in the swarm formation. Vorthak heavy cruisers concentrated their firepower on those exact locations, punching holes in the enemy lines. Then mixed squadrons of human and Vorthak fighters poured through the gaps, attacking the swarm from unexpected angles. Colonel Danny Foster led a boarding party of human Marines and Vorthak shock troops against a swarm command ship. The combination of human tactical thinking and Vorthak physical power proved unstoppable as they fought through the mechanical defenders. The ship's control center is heavily defended, reported Foster over the communication system. We need to breach 3 layers of automated defenses. Vorthak warriors will break the barriers, replied shock leader Kexmar. Human soldiers can disable the control systems once we reach them. The boarding action was brutal but successful. As Vorthak warriors smashed through mechanical defenses with raw strength, human soldiers slipped past to plant explosives on critical systems. When the command ship exploded, it took out the coordination systems for an entire swarm battle group. The turning point came when Captain Julia Mason, commanding the experimental ship Harmony with mixed human and Vorthak crew, discovered the swarm's weakness. The mechanical entities were controlled by a central intelligence, but they had no backup systems for independent thinking. If we can disrupt their command signals, they become just mindless machines, Julia explained to the fleet commanders. My science officer has found the frequency they use for coordination. Vorthak Technical Chief Belketh, serving as Julia's second-in-command, studied the data with interest. Our ships can generate interference on that frequency, but we need to get close to their main fleet to make it effective. Then that's what we'll do, Julia decided. The final assault was a coordinated strike by both species working as one. Human ships used their speed and stealth to penetrate deep into swarm territory, while Vorthak vessels provided heavy fire support. When they reached the optimal position, every ship in the combined fleet activated their jamming systems simultaneously. The effect was immediate and devastating. Cut off from their controlling intelligence, the swarm ships became helpless. They continued their programmed movements but couldn't adapt to changing circumstances. Human and Vorthak forces destroyed them methodically, like farmers harvesting a field. Swarm fleet is neutralized, reported Susan Hayes from the Defiant. All enemy ships destroyed or disabled. Across the combined fleet, cheers erupted from both human and Vorthak crews. They had done something neither species could have accomplished alone. They had turned the galaxy's greatest threat into scattered wreckage through cooperation and mutual respect. War Chief Gentar appeared on the main communication screen, his scarred face showing something humans had never seen from a Vorthak before. Pride in others rather than just himself. Today we have proven that strength comes not from conquering others but from standing together, he declared. The alliance between our species has saved both our civilizations. General Martinez nodded from his command ship. This is just the beginning. Other swarm fleets are still out there, but now we know we can beat them. As the combined fleet began rescue operations and salvage work, word of the victory spread throughout the galaxy. Other species watched in amazement as the two most feared civilizations in known space had become protectors rather than conquerors. The age of the Deathworld Alliance had begun. 6 months after the victory at Kepler system, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have imagined. The Human-Vorthak Alliance had grown into something much larger, becoming the Deathworld Coalition that now protected dozens of smaller civilizations from the remaining swarm fleets. Ambassador Tony Clark stood on the observation deck of Haven Prime, the first integrated colony where humans and Vorthak lived together as neighbors. Below him, children of both species played in the streets while their parents worked side by side in shops and factories. It was a sight that would have been impossible to imagine just 1 year ago. The integration is proceeding better than expected, reported Vorthak diplomat warrior Hexlan as he joined Tony at the viewing window. The massive alien had learned to speak human languages fluently and now served as cultural liaison between the species. The children adapt fastest, Tony observed, watching a group of human and Vorthak youngsters playing a game that seemed to combine elements from both cultures. They don't see enemies when they look at each other. They just see friends. Hexlan nodded his great head. My own offspring has learned more about cooperation in 3 months here than I learned in 30 years of conquest. Perhaps the young ones will build a better galaxy than we did. The success of Haven Prime had inspired other joint settlements across the frontier. But the real changes were happening at the highest levels of both governments. Captain Julia Mason, now promoted to Admiral, commanded the first fully integrated starship in galactic history. The UAS Harmony operated with a crew that was 60% human and 40% Vorthak, with officers from both species serving in all departments. Her second-in-command, Vorthak Technical Chief Belketh, had adapted to human command structures while bringing Vorthak engineering expertise to the ship's operations. Navigation reports were approaching the Centauri system, announced Lieutenant David Kim from his station on the bridge. The young human officer worked alongside Vorthak navigator Zextor, their different perspectives combining to create the most accurate stellar positioning in the fleet. Any signs of swarm activity? Julia asked. Negative, Captain, replied Belketh, studying his tactical displays. The system appears clear. The civilian evacuation ships should be safe to return to their colonies. This had become the Coalition's primary mission. Where once humans and Vorthak had fought each other for territory, now they worked together to protect refugees and rebuild worlds damaged by the Void Swarm. It was a transformation that had surprised everyone, including themselves. Dr. Steve Parker's research station in orbit around Jupiter had become the center of scientific cooperation between the species. Human and Vorthak scientists worked together to understand the technology recovered from destroyed swarm ships, while also searching for evidence of other threats in deep space. The long-range sensor array is picking up something interesting, reported Dr. Lisa Carter, now leading the xenobiology department. She had worked closely with Vorthak biologists to understand how different species could coexist peacefully. What kind of readings? Asked Steve as he studied the data on his screen. Energy signatures from the Andromeda Galaxy. They match the patterns we've seen from Deathworld species. I think there might be others out there. The possibility of finding more species like humans and Vorthak was exciting, but also concerning. Would they be allies or enemies? Would they share the same values of protecting the weak? Or would they follow the old pattern of conquest and domination? On Earth, President Helen Baker was meeting with Emperor Thokmar of the Vorthak Empire to discuss the future of their alliance. The two leaders had developed a friendship based on mutual respect, something that would have been impossible when they first met. The Galactic Council has formally recognized the coalition as a peacekeeping force, Helen reported as they walked through the gardens outside the presidential palace. 17 civilizations have requested our protection from various threats. Emperor Thokmar, despite his massive size and fearsome appearance, moved carefully among the delicate earth flowers. He had developed an appreciation for human art and beauty, concepts that had been foreign to Vorthak culture before the alliance. My people are still learning to think of strength as a tool for protection rather than conquest, he admitted, but the change is happening. Our young warriors now train to defend others, not to dominate them. It's the same with us, Helen replied. We're learning that sometimes the right choice is to stand and fight, even when retreat might be safer. Your people have taught us about courage. In the face of overwhelming odds, the formal ceremony took place in the Great Assembly Hall of the United Nations building in New York. Representatives from over 50 species gathered to witness the signing of the Galactic Protection Accords, the document that would establish the coalition as the official guardians of galactic peace. Today we create something new, Helen said, as she signed the historic document. Not an empire built on conquest, but a partnership built on the idea that the strong have a duty to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Emperor Thokmar added his signature with a massive hand, his claws carefully controlled to avoid damaging the precious document. For 3,000 years, the Vorthak believed that might makes right. Today we learn that right makes might. Ambassador Veltara of the Etherians watched the ceremony with deep satisfaction. Her species had worked for millennia to promote peace in the galaxy, but had never seen anything like this. Alliance between two Deathworld species. This partnership between humans and Vorthak proves that evolution's greatest achievement is not creating the perfect predator, she observed to the assembled delegates. It is creating predators who choose to become protectors. But even as they celebrated this historic moment, new challenges were emerging. Captain Rick Turner, commanding the long-range exploration vessel Pioneer, was leading the first joint expedition beyond the galactic edge. His mission was to search for other Deathworld species who might join the coalition. We're approaching the coordinates Dr. Parker provided, reported his Vorthak co-commander, Pathfinder Keldax. The two had worked together for months, learning to combine human curiosity with Vorthak determination. Sensors are detecting multiple energy signatures, called Science Officer Amy Chen from her station. These readings are off the charts. Whatever's out there, it's bigger than anything we've seen before. As the Pioneer moved deeper into unexplored space, its crew of humans and Vorthak prepared to make contact with whatever they might find. They carried with them the lessons learned from their own first meeting, that enemies could become friends, that strength was best used to protect rather than conquer, and that cooperation was stronger than competition. Contact in 30 minutes, reported Navigator Kexval, a young Vorthak who had grown up learning human languages and customs. All departments report ready for first contact protocol. Rick smiled as he looked around the bridge at his mixed crew. Humans and Vorthak working together as one team, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them among the stars. It was a sight that would have been impossible just 2 years ago, but now seemed as natural as breathing. Open all channels, he ordered. Let's see what's out there. In the distance, massive shapes moved between the stars. Other Deathworld species, perhaps, or entirely new forms of life. Whatever they were, the Deathworld Coalition was ready to meet them, not as conquerors or prey, but as partners in building a galaxy where the strong protected the weak and cooperation triumphed over conflict. The age of galactic peace had begun, founded on the simple idea that the most dangerous species in the universe could choose to become its greatest guardians, and in the depths of space, new adventures awaited those brave enough to seek them out. The strongest Deathworld species had met humanity, and nothing would ever be the same again.